Minister in the Ministry of Finance, Dr. Andre Vincent Henry, Director, Cipriani, College of Labor and Cooperative Studies, Mr. Afra Raymond, distinguished panelist here this evening, Mr. David Mohammed, distinguished panelist this evening, other specially invited guests, colleagues of the Cipriani College of Labor and Cooperative Studies. And it is indeed a pleasure to welcome you here this evening to this budget review for 2018, which we have so affectionately called the Post-Budget Forum. First of all, please let me extend sincerest appreciation to our panelists, our distinguished panelists here this evening, and we look forward to your robust contributions and even more robust questions from the audience.
Honorable Minister, Ms. Corrine Gregoire, Mr. Afra Raymond, and Mr. David Mohammed. I would like to congratulate my colleague, Akins Vidal, the coordinator of the Elmer Francois Institute, for his indefatigable work in putting together the program of the Elmer Francois Institute, and in particular today's activity. At Cipriani, we believe that we have a voice, and a voice that represents a very important part of our national community, and we would like to ensure that all policy, all discussions benefit from the unique voice that Cipriani College can bring to these discourses. So it is a particular delight to have you here. I want to express my thanks, especially not choosing sides, Afra, but thank the minister who has taken the time out to come to us, because she recognizes the importance of communicating with our constituents. So without further ado, I know you want to hear what the panelists have to say. I again welcome you, and I ask you to enjoy this evening session, and in particular, make sure that you engage our panelists in a robust and vigorous exchange of ideas. Thank you very much.
As we move along, this evening, we will address the budget statement for 2019. And in proceeding, there's a structure to how this evening's proceedings will roll out. As indicated on your program, there are panel presenters. Each panel presenter will present for 20 minutes, starting with Senator the Honorable Allyson West, moving along to Mr. David Mohammed, moving along to Ms. Corrine Gregoire, and then moving along to Mr. Afra Raymond. They will proceed one after the other. All questions we will collect at the end of all the presentations. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Senator the Honorable Allyson West.
Okay, so budget 2019 for the period October 2018 to September 2019 anticipates expenditure in the region of $47 billion and income in the region of $51 billion, giving us an estimated deficit of a little north of $4 billion, which is consistent with the minister's undertaking a couple of years ago to gradually reduce the deficit with the hope of getting us at least a break-even point by 2020. So the deficit last year was in the region of 6.5 to 7 billion. This year, we anticipate there will be a reduction to just north of $4 billion. In terms, the way we got there, because you would remember that we started out in the first year of the term of this government with a deficit in the region of about $10 billion, because there was a significant decrease in the revenue in that period. And what we did to try to reduce the deficit was to significantly reduce expenditure while we sought various ways to improve, to stabilize and improve the revenue. So there were significant cuts in expenditure in the public service, coming down from a high of $63 billion in 2014 to what it is now, 50 billion, 51 billion. We do not anticipate that there is much more we can do without a significant restructuring of the public service, which requires constitutional an amendment in accordance with the Constitution. We don't anticipate that we can generate significantly more savings in terms of expenditure. So the way we will have to approach getting towards a balanced budget is improving the revenue. And the ways that we are seeking to improve the revenue is, one, stimulate the economy on the one hand, and I will deal later on with the projects that we are looking at, and two, to improve the collection of the monies that are due to the state. And the way we are seeking to do that is to introduce the Revenue Authority. We're hoping to do that in 2019. And we can go into more detail on the Revenue Authority and our plans for that later on. The minister mentioned in his budget presentation that the growth that is, we moved from negative growth in 2016 of 6% to negative growth in 2017 of 2.3%. For 2018, we anticipate positive growth of 1.9%, real growth. And this is why we are saying that we are heading in the right direction, we are turning things around, and we expect an improvement. Some people have indicated at the higher level, because the way things work is that money tends to be received at the top and it trickles down very slowly. So there is an indication from some members of the business community, for example, that they are feeling relaxation of the austerity that we were suffering over the last 2 years. People lower down the economic scale. A lot of them are not yet feeling that, but we're hoping that with more activity and as time goes on, that will begin to trickle down. We based the revenue on oil price of $65 a barrel, which all the studies indicate are conservative. And if you look at the price of oil today, it's above $70, so we think we're safe with that. And traditionally, we have generally pitch the oil price at a reasonable amount, and we tend to come within that unless there is a significant problem in the industry that we don't anticipate. And we don't anticipate that happening this year. So all indications are that 65 is more than safe. Gas price we pitched at is $2.75. Breakdown of revenue among the industries, large scale. From the oil sector, we expect to earn $9.5 billion, which is an improvement on where it was 2 years ago of $1.9 billion, but significantly lower than where it was in 2014 at $20 billion. So for those of you who may not have heard this before, who may have forgotten, the most significant reason why we had this downturn in the economy was because we moved from receiving $20 billion in revenue from the energy sector in 2014 to receiving $1.9 billion in 2016. From the non-oil sector, we expect $35 billion and capital revenue, and this is from the sale of capital assets. And we had indicated during the budget presentation that the intention is to introduce another NIF offering with assets that we are still to recover from the CLICO transaction that were not recovered in time for the original NIF. In any event, even if it had been recovered, we were of the view that the targeted $4 billion that we had hoped to generate from that initial offering was more than enough. We should not seek to recover any more from the economy, so we left it at 4, and we hope in 2019 to raise a further $3 billion through a second NIF. So, in terms of specific fiscal measures, the one that has been receiving the most airplay is the adjustment in the cost of super gas at the pump. That's gone from 3.97 to 4.97. That is in a continuing effort to reduce and eventually eliminate the subsidy that is paid on gasoline, that the government has to bear in respect of gasoline. The subsidy would have cost the government, if nothing was done, the subsidy would have cost the government $1.5 billion in 2019. And we are seeking to reduce the subsidy and spend it in areas that are more deserving of government intervention, on the more vulnerable, on the essential services like hospitals and education and so on. Other fiscal measures for first-time homeowners who would normally have to pay stamp duty on the cost of their purchase of their home above $850,000. We are increasing that exemption limit to $1.5 billion because that is more in keeping with the kinds of money that you now need to acquire a house. So, in addition to our efforts to build and supply more public housing, we are also seeking to assist these people who have identified houses that they want to buy by hopefully removing completely the cost of the stamp duty. Because I know how it is, I've been through it. You finally find a house that you think you can live in, and you think you can barely make the mortgage if you scrimp and save on the down payment, and then they tell you, well, you have legal fees to pay, and you have stamp duty to pay, and you haven't catered for any of those things. So we have tried to assist, we're thinking that it will most likely assist young people, young professionals who are now coming up and trying to get their lives organized and trying to get their first homes. So that is one of the fiscal measures. We have also increased the tertiary education allowance. Now, how that works is that because the government provides support in respect of Trinidad and Tobago supported institutions like UE and UTT, the allowance won't apply to those, but anybody who sends their child or wife or husband to a university other than those will have to incur costs more likely than not to support that person's education, and you are entitled to an allowance which up to 2018 was $60,000 a year. So we have increased that to $70,000 to provide more relief because we know that the cost of foreign education is expensive. We are to introduce for the benefits of manufacturers, because one of the buzzwords that we keep hearing is diversification, and we are seeking various ways to support and develop that. And so what we are saying to manufacturers is, and we have done this in consultation with the manufacturers, so they are on board with how we're doing it. As you incrementally increase your foreign exchange earnings, you can get a tax credit against your tax liability. So this, we are hoping, will inspire them to export more, to earn more foreign exchange, to declare all their foreign earnings, and to hopefully repatriate those foreign earnings to provide some relief in respect of the forex problem that we have ongoing, not as bad as it was, but continuing to be an issue in Trinidad and Tobago. Right, so in addition to those measures, what we have done is taken some of the savings from the removal of part of the subsidy on super, because there is still a continuing subsidy on super. The only petrol at the pump that we don't pay, that the government does not pay a subsidy on at the moment, is premium gas. There's a subsidy remaining on super, there's a subsidy on regular, there's a subsidy on diesel. So we have taken some of the savings from the partial removal of the subsidy and applied that to provide greater support to the most vulnerable. We have all been suffering over the last few years from the downturn in the economy, but we thought that we needed to focus at this time on the most vulnerable. And so, in furtherance of that, we have increased the payments due to the differently abled citizens from $811.50 to $1,500 a month, where we are talking about disabled children, and in respect of disabled adults, we have increased the payment from $1,800 to $2,000 per month for each disabled adult. We have increased the food card grant per household by $100 at each level. And the food card grant is paid depending on the number of persons who are to benefit. Where you have 1 to 3 persons in the household, it's moved from $410 to $510. Where you have 4 to 5 persons in the household, it's moved from $550 to $650. And where you have more than 6 people, it's moved from $700 to $800. Public assistance grants, there's a $150 increase per month across the board. So a grant that benefits 1 person moves from $1,150 to $1,300. A grant that benefits 2 persons moves from $1,400 to $1,550. 3 persons from $1,600 to $1,750. And 4+ persons from $1,750 to $1,900. Senior citizens, how we have dealt with them is we have increased the cap on the pension that they can receive when they are in receipt of NIS on the one hand and senior citizens pension on the other. Now, what we have found is because of the increase that occurred maybe 2 or 3 years ago in the senior citizens pension, what is popularly called old age pension, you had people receiving relief from this, people who had not made contributions in respect of retirement payments, receiving payments from the state that were greater than the payments that employees who were contributing to the NIS system received. And we thought that was inequitable. So we have increased the cap so that the people who have contributed to NIS during the course of their lives will receive a little more. So instead of the $5,500 that they currently get, it will go to $6,000. And that's it in respect of the fiscal measures. In addition to that, in the budget presentation, we would have made mention of some of the projects that we are targeting to stimulate activity and growth in the sector. So we have the traditional type capital projects. We have the Curep interchange that is in progress. We have the Point Fortin highway that is in progress. We have the Togo to Manzanilla highway that now that we have successfully defended the position that was brought in respect of the EMA matter, that it has started and will be full steam ahead now. In respect of diversification, we have the La Brea dry dock and transshipment facility, which in my view is going to be transformational. The way that is structured is that we are partnering with the Chinese. They are going to take equity in the project, And the benefit of them taking equity in the project is they have a stake now in the success of the project. The Chinese are responsible for thousands of boats flowing through the Panama Canal, and if they have a stake in a dry dock facility, more likely than not, they will channel their boats to that dry dock facility that they have a stake in and increase the likelihood of success of that facility. The site is an ideal site. It is ideally placed for people coming through the canal, for people heading from north to south and vice versa. And they have the expertise, and they will transfer the expertise to the people who are involved in the industry. It creates roll-on opportunities for additional creation of employment, not only in the facility, but the support services. Because what you will have is boats with crews coming to Trinidad to be dry docked, to be repaired, to be fueled, and whatever. And so that brings people, and people need hotels, they need food, they need entertainment. So it creates not only opportunity for the individuals who will be directly employed in the facility, but also for the rest of the community to support that facility. We have the Phoenix Park Industrial Park, which is supposed to start construction in January of next year. We have already identified 11 anchor tenants for that facility. So we anticipate that will also be a driver in terms of diversification. It should get off the ground fairly quickly. The construction period is expected to be just the 2019 calendar year. So by 2020, we should have tenants, we should be earning rent, they should be generating income and paying taxes to the government of Trinidad and Tobago. So that too will produce some activity and positive growth, we are hoping. And then the final project, which I will mention, is the much maligned Sanders project in Tobago, that we are hoping to finalize that transaction in the not too distant future and get cracking on construction so that we can have a regeneration of activity in Tobago and the roll-on effect of demand in terms of agricultural supply for the food, staffing, training that will impact on the rest of the industry. We are building the airport to increase the flow. We have ordered 2 additional boats to increase the sea bridge as well. So these are the main projects that we are focused on. And as somebody from San Fernando, I'm happy to say that I am convinced that the waterfront project that I've been hearing about since I was yay high is actually going to start in 2019, and that should have an impact on San Fernando. We also have a couple of other projects that will support and buffer the impact of the fallout of the closure of the refinery at Petrotrin. Not the closure of Petrotrin, but the closure of the refinery at Petrotrin. So with those few words, I will turn you back over to the chair.
Senator, we thank you. Let's say it once again for Senator. And we'd like to welcome Ms. Corrine Gregoire, one of our lecturers here at Cipriani College of Labor and Cooperative Studies. And she is a researcher within the field of developmental economics. She has served as a lecturer in the Labor Studies Department here at the college, and she holds an Associate of Arts degree in Labor Studies from the Cipriani College of Labor and Cooperative Studies, a Bachelor of Science and a Master of Science in Economics from the University of the West Indies, and is currently pursuing her PhD in the field of economics. Ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Corrine Gregoire to present.
So again, we're here to do an overview of the budget. So what I would like to do is to first outline what the structure of the presentation should look like. First, we're going to do an overview of the economy. So as an academic and an economist, I have to focus on the macroeconomic variables. Then I have to look at the major themes within the budget. The minister would have outlined them. I will go over some, hopefully not in too much detail that I become a bore. We're going to look at the themes and the major policies and see how those two things align. And then we're going to look at the impacts of the budget, looking at it from the framework of economics and also industrial relations. Right. So we have to look at first the major macroeconomic variables. We have to determine what the state of the economy looks like. So we have to take first our gross domestic product, which really speaks to the productive activity of the economy. And when I say productive activity, exactly what output is being created. As she would have said, the projection for 2018 into 2019 is 1.9%. But as I would tell my ECN 210 class, we always have to look back, determine the trend, and then go forward. So if I started off at 2013, it's going to be 2%. If I looked at 2014, the economy would have contracted by 1%. In 2015, we'd see growth of 1.8%. In 2016, a great contraction of 6.5%. In 2017, a contraction again of 1.9%. So what we're seeing, we are in the hole and we're eventually starting to come back out. Now, I did neglect to say that the figures that I'm using are from the annual economic survey and from the review of the economy. Now, we want to say this 1.9%. What does this 1.9% represent? The 1.9% is going to represent increases in the manufacturing sector, finance and insurance activities, transport and storage, administrative and support services, education, and electricity and gas. This this increase in these different sectors is going to give us 47.3% increase of the real economy. So when we look at this 47.3%, it says these sectors are going to expand. However, 50.3% of the economy is still in decline. If we pull the manufacturing sector alone, that's going to give us 7% to the contribution of GDP, and that 7% is going to be based on food and beverage, petroleum and chemicals, and textile and clothing. So we have some idea of what the productive activity looks like, where the income is going to come from, and what we probably should focus on. The next macroeconomic variable will be inflation. Again, the projection is 1% for 2018. The inflation rate that we're looking at, what we called 1%, is the headline rate, and that is going to be based on the retail price index. We get that 1% for 2018, and for the previous year, 2017, we had 1.9%. The rate of inflation would have slowed over the entire period between 2013 to 2016 by about 2%, and this would have been because of the challenging economic environment and low consumer demand, which generally means that we have less money, so we want to buy less goods and services, so the price eventually falls. Then we want to look at the population. The population is kind of stable at 1.3 million people. It's between 2017 and 2018, it increased by only 2,560 persons. So now we want to break down the population and see what the distribution is. It's about 50.2% males and 49.8% females. So yes, gentlemen, there are more of you than there are of people like me. Yeah? The labor force. The participation rate for 2017 is 59.5%. Now, the participation rate says people who are not in institutions, who are willing, able, and looking for work and part of the labor force. So to be in the labor force, you have to be either employed or unemployed. So this 59.5% represents 637,000 people. Now again, we have to look at the trend, what happened the year before, and then what happens in the current year. So the labor force participation rate in 2016 is 59.7%, which means that we had a marginal decline from 2016 to 2017. Now, again, go further and get the trend. The labor force participation rate has been declining since 2014. Unemployment. The unemployment rate for 2017 is 5%. That means that we have 31,700 persons within the economy that is unemployed. The unemployment rate would have increased by 1% between 2016 and 2017, And as well, unemployment has been increasing since 2014. The unemployment rate for females is usually higher than it is for males. So if I were to say anything about unemployment and labor force, the unemployment rate is increasing while the labor force is declining. So we get into central government expenditures, and the governments, this administration and the previous administration, would have been running budget deficits. Since 2013, we would have had budget deficits. The figures for this year, I will deal with that in a little bit, but I want to just get some perspective of what the previous period would have looked like. So for fiscal 2017-2018, the budget deficit would have been approximately $4.7 billion, which is 3% of the GDP. Revising the estimates from 2017-2018, we'd get closer to about 6%. Now, where does this deficit go? Because again, when you hear a deficit of how many of $1 billion, you want to know where is the money going to. So 57% of the deficit that we experience is going to be placed in the current account. So we're saying, yes, that we have a budget deficit, but when we look at where the money is going to, the money has to take place, or it's going to be spent from the current account. Now, if we look at our total expenditure and what percentage of the current expenditure is of total expenditure, that is 92%. So we're saying that of your total expenditure, current expenditure represents 92%, and then the problem with that now is a very large percentage of your current expenditure is going to transfers and subsidies. Then we get to the Heritage and Stabilization Fund. The fund is approximately $5.7 billion in 2017, and no increases or no monies would have been put into the fund. Monies that would have been in the fund would have been invested, and portfolio investments will now give us returns of about $216 million. So changes within the Heritage and Stabilization Fund only come from returns to investment. Next, we get on to public sector debt. Public sector debt for 2018 is estimated at 60.9%. That would have come down from the previous year, 2017, at 61.9%. Next, we look at the non-financial public sector operations. In that account, we are seeing now that a lot of what we are seeing is budget deficit once again. A lot of the public utilities are operating at a loss. The only public utility that's not operating at a loss would be the Port Authority, and they make a surplus of $11.8 million. All of the other public utilities are operating at losses, and the size of the loss for all of those utilities is $1.73 billion. WASA is responsible for 68.4% of that, which is approximately $1.18 billion. The monetary sector. In fiscal 2017-2018, the central bank would have injected approximately $5 billion into the economy, and that US would have been used in retail and distribution. It would have been put to the manufacturing sector, towards the settlement of credit card transactions and the purchase of automobiles. So then we have to ask ourselves, what are we doing with our US, right? Nice. Then we should look at the exchange rate. It would have been depreciated by only 2%. So it's not, the rate is kind of stable. The repo rate would have been maintained up until June 2018 at 4.75%, and it would have been increased to 5% after that. So what we're saying is that we have a bit of excess liquidity in the system. So now that we have an idea of what the state of the economy looks like, we have to ask ourselves, what is in the budget? So first thing we're looking at is what is the size of our revenue. The minister gave us an accurate figure, which is about $47 billion. Of this $47 billion, oil revenue accounts for about 20%. The non-oil revenue will be about 74%, and capital revenue will be approximately 6%. The estimated expenditures, it is $51 billion, and if we slip across to here, we're going to be able to see the breakdown of where the expenditures are going to be allocated. We can see education and training, national security and health get the largest share of the expenditures. The Tobago House of Assembly would have gotten a bit over $2 million, but they would have gotten an additional $1 billion increase, and that is to pay legal obligations from the THA and the other ministries. What I have on the slide here represents approximately 64% of the expenditure of the budget. The remainders would be miscellaneous expenses, transfers and subsidies, and possibility of closure of Petrotrin and the expenditures allocated to that. So now that I know what the expenditures look like, we know that we're incurring a budget deficit of about $4 million. We intend to finance that. Now, when I say we, the government intends to finance that from the domestic capital market. Right, if I can get back on track, my budget deficit again is 4.76 billion. The revised estimates for that from 2017-2018 would have been 6.2 billion. So we want to ask ourselves, yes, we know that the government has been running budget deficits, but what is the size of the deficit each time the budget is run? So we're saying again, for 2018, it's 4.76. For 2017, it's approximately 6 billion. And again, well, I have a different figure from the minister. I have a larger figure, which is 21.4. So basically what we're getting is that the government is using a lot of strategies to be able to cut down the expenditure and try to put expenditure in line with the revenues. Now, I neglected to say one thing, was that the theme of the budget is called the turnaround. Now, every budget, once you look at it, has a theme, and the strategies that the government is supposed to implement must be in line with the theme. So now that we have the theme of the turnaround in our minds, we have to ask ourselves, what are the main elements or the main policies that the government is going to use to create this turnaround? So the first policy listed would have been the arrangement with Venezuela to use their Dragon gas field for us to import a ready supply of natural gas. This would cost the government about $1 billion TT to be able to build the pipeline, but we have no estimates within the budget stated of revenue projections or of impact on the labor force. The next policy would have been the raising of capital through the National Investment Fund. Now, based on what the minister said and my research within the annual economic survey and in the review of the economy, 4 billion TT dollars would have been raised by using the National Investment Fund the first time around. No estimate was made for how much is going to be raised the second time around or the second offering, so we could only estimate it's going to be 4 billion, and it continues to be 4 billion and possibly more. The cost of the closure of Petrotrin, which is the third policy to create the turnaround. Now, that's a bit kind of neither here nor there, because remember there's an injunction for Petrotrin. But if the closure is successful, it will cost $2.6 billion and approximately 5,000 jobs will be lost. The establishment of Sandals Tobago. Now I know we have Mr. Afra Raymond on board, and I think he's going to give you the full 100 on how that is supposed to go. So I would merely say that no estimate of the cost of construction of Sandals would have been made in the budget. The estimated revenues to come from that should be about 80 million, and it should provide 2,000 jobs. Now, 2,000, what type of jobs? We are not clear, but 2,000 jobs. The establishment of the dry dock and shipbuilding ship repair facility, that's going to cost the government US $500 million to be spread over 3 years. It should create 3,500 direct and 5,700 indirect jobs in the construction phase. In the operation phase, so after you have constructed and the facility is now operational, it should create 2,700 jobs and 2,700 direct and 13,000 indirect jobs. The last policy to create the turnaround would be the 2 fast ferries to revitalize the sea bridge. In the budget stated there were no projections of cost or revenues to be generated. So because we're a labor college, we have to look at the issues related to industrial relations. So we have to see what the unemployment rate is, and that unemployment rate since 2014 has been on the increase. Now remember, a little while back I gave you all some idea of what the unemployment rate would have been looking like, but again to remind us, in 2014 it's about 3.3%, in 2015 3.4%, 2016 4%, 2017, 5%. So we're seeing a gradual upward trend for unemployment. Now, based on the annual economic survey between January to June 2016 to January to June 2017, where would have been that unemployment? So why are we seeing the 1% increase between 2016 and 2017? So if we look to see where the unemployed people are coming from, 4,600 persons would have come from petroleum, 1,100 from construction, 2,100 from transport, and then we have another problem to deal with of youth unemployment. The youth unemployment continues to be high. If we break down the age ranges or look at the distribution of where the figures are related to youth unemployment, between 15 to 19 years of age, there are 16.1% of that population unemployed. Between 20 to 24, 10% of the people there are unemployed. And between the ages 25 to 29, 8.2% of the population is unemployed. All the other categories, meaning everybody over 29, will only have 3% of unemployment within their category. The labor force, as mentioned before, is on the decline. We want to look at the number of collective agreements that would have been negotiated. In 2017, 14 collective agreements would have been negotiated. In 2016, 13 agreements would have been negotiated. The wage increases in the 2017 collective agreements would have averaged around 3%, and that would have been down from the periods before where it was about 4.25%. Minimum wages remain at 15%. COLA remains at $120 per month, and there are a host of factors that affect the ability of the wages to be increased during the negotiation process. And the industrial relation climate still remains a bit unsettled. So now, as an economist, I should give you at least one graph, right? I think that's only fair. Yeah? So what this slide is going to show you is the linkage between visible and invisible exports. Now, to make the discussion a little easier, this is supposed to show us productive activity within the economy for tradable goods, meaning goods that we could actually hold and touch. What does Trinidad and Tobago export that we could hold and touch? What does Trinidad and Tobago import that we could hold and touch, right? So my red line is my exports, my visible exports, and that is based on petroleum, which is crude, and refined gas, petroleum chemicals, and others. So based on the export component, it accounts for about 80% yearly of the total visible exports. So let me make sure we have that clear together. 80% of the visible exports are going to come from the petroleum sector, crude, and refined gas, petrochemicals, and other chemicals. When we look at the visible imports, things that we import that we could really put our hands and touch on, which is my kind of gray line, what we're seeing is fuel, capital, and other, and 62% of what we import is related to non-energy imports. So if I can take you back and we can throw in the Venezuela argument inside of here, if we are now going to use one of the elements to create the turnaround that's supposed to boost the economy, we are going to be importing more. So we are going to remove the figure from being 62% of imports being non-energy. We're going to increase the energy component, and then we are going to decrease the stuff that we're exporting. So if we were to look at 2016, it started to cross, which means that once we use a policy of importing from Venezuela, we are going to aggravate this problem a bit further. So what we're looking at here now, beyond this, we're going to see issues related to manufacturing and the petroleum industry. We may need to do some further analysis of what happens within those industries. As the minister mentioned, there would have been other sectors or activities that would have been within the budget. We would have seen the tourism industry would have been taking on a different shape. The Tobago Tourism Agency is responsible for what happens in Tobago, and again, the Sandals Tobago is going to be on board. They're going to be rebranding and seeking new operators for the Magdalena Grande. There's going to be construction of the airport in Tobago and the Air and the Sea Bridge. In Trinidad, the tourism product is vastly different. What we're looking to do is to try to seek spaces for meetings, exhibitions, and conferences. So that's two different products, and we have no real estimates of revenues from what these two projects are going to give to us. Apart from that, we have the other industries. Some of them would have been named in the budget: yachting, creative industries, the industrial estates, and most importantly, agriculture. Agriculture would have had in the budget stated a cocoa and coconut rehabilitation program, a next generation hatchery in Couva, and an agro-processing and light industrial park to be put on board. So after I have said all of this, what is the conclusion? Now, again, as an academic, it is not my job to give you a conclusion, but to lead you to a point that you can come to a conclusion on your own. So we have again in mind the theme of the turnaround. We have in mind the 6 pillars that we're going to use. So we have to ask ourselves where the problems are in the economy and what changes that's laid out in the budget will help us to bring that turnaround. So where are the policies targeted to deal with the problems within the labor force? So we saw that the labor force is declining. What is happening to create that decline in the labor force? What are the policies that are going to be put in place to bring about changes with youth unemployment? What are going to be the, well, the minister would have indicated some of the issues with the public transportation, and the most backlash they are getting is from the increase of the price of super by $1. When we get that savings from the revenue, to the average individual operates as a tax, to the government it is a cost savings, but when you move the monies from one way and to put it into somewhere else, we are already putting it, and we have been told it's going to be put towards other areas, possibly the different types of grants, but we want to know what happens to the public transportation systems, because we each need to use it every day. So if we don't want to spend $26 billion over 16 years, what's going to happen with the savings that we get? We want to see a transportation system that could take us through the day. And a point I thought was most important, all of the public utilities besides the port are operating at a loss. So what is going to be the plans for those workers to make those utility companies more profitable, more streamlined? What are going to be the plans for those workers once the plans to come on board to make them become more streamlined? So with that, I leave you hopefully with some food for thought, and I see my chair watching me, so I am out of time, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gregoire. Very stirring presentation. So we thank you again. Thank you, Ms. Gregoire. Right, next up we have Mr. David Mohammed. Now, he is a sociologist, lecturer, activist, and author, and he's also the founder and head of the Black Agenda Project Organization. He is the Trinidad and Eastern Caribbean representative of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam. He is also the founding director of the Kwame Ture Education Center in Trinidad, housed in a structure built by Mr. Mohammed and colleagues on the land acquired by the government. He holds a double major degree from the University of the West Indies in sociology and education, and awaits confirmation for his doctorate in sociology for his PhD thesis on, and this is the topic, juvenile delinquency and criminal gang activity. He also holds a teacher's diploma from the University of Trinidad and Tobago and has lectured extensively across the Caribbean, the US, Canada, and the UK. He is featured 3 times weekly on radio and television in Trinidad, and also writes for the TNT Mirror newspaper and occasionally for the internationally circulated Final Call newspaper. He is also a prisons program facilitator and lecturer. And on that note, I'd like to welcome Mr. David Mohammed to the podium to deliver his 20-minute presentation.
It is indeed an honor, a pleasure, and a privilege to have the opportunity to share some thoughts with you on this topic, and I pray that by the time that I'm through with this short conversation that I would have said something that would be of benefit to you in one way or another. Of course, as mentioned, my field is sociology, and I can only give an overview from my vantage point. And I want to begin on the foundation of the idea of where we are currently. We are at the Cipriani College of Labor and Corporate Studies in the C.L.R. James Auditorium. C.L.R. James, like myself, was a school teacher. He had a young student by the name of Eric Williams. And C.L.R. James at the Queen's Royal College would share with his students the idea of a federation of the Caribbean nations. And Dr. Eric Williams would have become inspired by that idea. Later on, Dr. Eric Williams, in also being a teacher, began to share ideas with the public of Trinidad and Tobago, and by extension, the Caribbean region. And in what is referred to as his autobiography, The Inward Hunger, he spoke of a meeting with some labor leaders where they came together and examined the idea that even though so many poor people work so hard in this society, they are still neither the owners nor controllers of neither the means nor the forces of production. And if we stay in that realm, we will stay poor forever. So it was in The Inward Hunger that Dr. Eric Williams spoke of the idea of establishing a learning institution to fix that problem, which was this college where we are now, the Cipriani Labor College, as it was called. And out of that meeting, this institution was established. And so if I have the opportunity to share some ideas with you today, here and now, they will most certainly be rooted in that ideology that was at the root foundation of this learning institution. And so the same Dr. Eric Williams, after a 1970 Black Power revolution 2 years later for his 1972 budget presentation, was inspired by some of the thoughts, views, opinions, and ideas that came out of Black Power, and also from direct democracy from as far back as 1964, where he went to the people and collected 136 memoranda through secretaries of the thoughts, views, and opinions of the average citizen and how they felt about the national budget. And so in 1972, Dr. Eric Williams, in his budget presentation to our beloved country, he said that there will be no new 100% foreign-owned companies in Trinidad and Tobago. My prime minister back then said that there will be none, not one, no new foreign-owned 100% firms, companies, corporations coming in Trinidad and Tobago. And that the existing ones, by law, must find a way to open up their operations to the widest national participation as possible. That was 1972. And thank God that the oil boom came after that. Because if the oil boom came before those measures, maybe a lot of those windfall dollars would have not ended up in our pockets. That was 1972. We come to the budget presentation of 2018 now. Completely different time. And my first concern is the tone of it. Because how could you start off a budget presentation telling us that the people of Trinidad and Tobago understand and accept, in words, the economic ideology of the government, as if everyone is happy with it. And then after you say something like that, in the streets, people are protesting, complaining about not having enough money, not even enough food to eat. We have several members of parliament in this country who have never walked the streets in some areas of their communities to see for themselves what is happening in those places. We had a member of the Senate recently who went into the prison and came out so horrified that he went into the parliament and he spoke about the inhumane living conditions in the Port of Spain prison. And I applauded him for bringing that to the parliament, but I had to question, how could you even get to the parliament in the first place if you don't know the conditions of the people? You're supposed to know that first, and then we could elect you. How could we elect you first and then hope that one day you will be in touch with us? So don't start off a budget presentation telling us that we are happy. No, we're not. And then it was said at the beginning that this is an approximate $52 or $51 billion budget, which is $13 billion or $15 billion less than the average of the last set of budgets that were presented. Okay, now this brings us to the reality of the fact that you have an economy on paper and in theory, but you have another economy in practicality and reality. And you cannot judge the budget by what's written down on paper. You have to judge the budget by what's happening in real life. And the truth of the matter is, in real life right now, the people are feeling pain. People are robbing every single day, crime rates going up, murder like we live in some kind of war zone. And when we see on paper that we're spending less, what is the truth of that and where is the money going to? Case in point, and my beloved colleague spoke a lot about the 1%. So I'm going to speak about the 1% too. Apparently it's acceptable. I was listening. And let me issue a disclaimer, because it has been said that this talk about the 1% is dividing the country. But who started it? I didn't start it. Someone said, we are the 1%. And we are the most powerful ethnic minority. And we are the Starbucks of the Caribbean. That's what they said. And you know what the real joke about it is? At the time when they were saying that on CNN, on the Parts Unknown program hosted by Anthony Bourdain, we in Trinidad couldn't even see it because Flow Cable Television blocks off the special report CNN programs on Saturday evenings between 8 o'clock and 10 o'clock. So we weren't even seeing it. But Trinis all over the world started sending these videos back to us. And we were saying, what? What is this? What are these people saying? So they weren't dividing the country for saying it, but we're dividing the country for repeating it? Now, think about this. One of the businesses that are owned by the 1% is Amalgamated Security. And when I see in the budget, you're talking about dollars and cents and how much money is being spent on what, but who's getting the money? It was said in a news report recently that the contract to transport the prison inmates between the jail and the courts is $40 million per year. $40 million per year is $3.3 million per month, which is $769,200 per week, which is $110,000 per day. You have now in this country, there was a report on Haiti and how 70% of the Haitian prison population are unconvicted. But I heard that in Trinidad it's close to 90%. You have a remand yard with prisons, cells that are to accommodate 2 people that have 13 big, strong, grown, hardback men in them. I'm not telling you what I read in a book. I'm telling you what I see with my own 2 eyes when I go in there. I'm not telling you what I read in some text message or some article. I'm telling you what I saw. And these prisons with 13, 14 men in them have no beds, no running water, no toilet, no lights, and just garbage everywhere, and one hell of a stench. Now you have men in there for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years who have not been convicted as yet, don't even know if they're innocent or guilty according to the system. If the justice system were working properly, maybe you'll have to go to the court maybe about 7 times before we could determine your innocence or guilt. But you in there for 5 years, going to prison once every couple months, adding up to 87 visits, and every time you go, $110,000 goes into the pocket of someone. And then when you go to the court, go and see for yourself. All of these poor single mothers being hustled by these lawyers like street vendors, trying to get cases prolonged for these poor, innocent, single mothers, trying to keep one child out of jail while the other child is in jail. But someone's making money off all of this. So because the justice system is faulty, someone's making money, the lawyers. Someone's making money off the fact that they're transporting their children up and down, $110,000 a day. Someone else is making money from the fact that they're selling hardware, software, technology, CCTV, hidden cameras, and all different types of security systems. So the more crime that exists, the richer the 1% get. And sociologist Emile Durkheim said from the beginning that crime is part of the functionalist purpose of society. They're getting rich off our ignorance, and now when you speak like how I am speaking right now, they call you unpatriotic. You have to put up with 20 minutes of this. And only 12 minutes have gone so far. I'm marking my own time. And I have a few extra seconds because I marked the time for when I was on the steps. So there's a real budget, and there's a budget that's, it's like fake news. You want to tell me that all these good things happen, and the worst of the worst ever was the interference with GATE. I've been lecturing at this college since 2012. And that, I started my education degree in 2004 at the University of the West Indies. And once our beloved former Prime Minister Patrick Manning introduced GATE, within 1 year, 2015 into 2005 into 2006, you couldn't even get a parking space. They had to get more land to have more car parks to park cars. There was an instant, overnight, quadruple, tripling of enrollment into the university. Now, we've taken a backward step. One of the most backward steps. It's so foolish, and it's a representative of how out of touch we can be with the people. Because if you're going to say, well, we're going to implement a means test for you to get assistance for tuition, don't you understand the basic psychology of the people? One of the characteristics of poverty is to conceal the fact that you have no money. That's why poor people wear the biggest, thickest gold chains. And now you're going to put me through a means test? So I am going to openly admit to you, yes, I am dirt poor. I don't have a cent. Please, can you help fund me? No! And you should have known better than to do that. Who's making these decisions? Patrick Manning would be turning in his grave to know what we have done. This government did that, and the last government did it by interfering with the process in the first place. When you had to access GATE at first, all you had to do was sign your name on a piece of paper and write the date. That is all, nothing else. That's what I did for about 4 or 6 semesters when I was at UWI, when they started GATE. Now all of this, these obstacles, I don't know the whole process, but you go to a GATE center, get a GATE number, take your height, your weight, urine sample. It's ridiculous. Let me check the time. All right, 15 minutes. You have 5 more minutes of this. So, beloved, I say to you with the deepest of respect, it was said at the budget that the Sandals Hotel will be at the center of a vibrant tourism market. Again, all of that looks good on paper, but for who? I have been privileged to travel with the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan through about 8 or 9 different Caribbean nations. And everywhere when he goes and he addresses the public, he tells the people, poor black people, don't ever feel satisfied in being a maid or a butler in some hotel or to clean the rooms and change the bed sheets when they tell you they're expanding the tourism industry. So when the government announces, okay, we're opening a bigger hotel, what does that mean for me? that I'm going to get to mop the damn floor? And you want me to rejoice for that? Meanwhile, someone else, in fact, many times it's even foreigners who have come and had a taste of this beautiful Caribbean paradise. And they're the ones who end up sometimes becoming entrepreneurs in our nation. But I hold up Grenada as an example. Grenada, that has the lowest crime rate in the English-speaking Caribbean. Yes, Grenada has one or two of the large hotels, but most of the accommodation in Grenada is from small and medium-sized hotels and guest houses that are owned by the middle-income Grenadian people. So you have an expanding middle class in Grenada. I was there for a public holiday and they announced on the radio there are 4 KFCs in Grenada. And for the public holidays, they said all will be closed except one, which will open at 3 o'clock. Telling you, stay home with your family, prepare a good, healthy meal, and let's bond together and grow our nation through family values. Meanwhile, on our public holiday, that is like KFC, Murder King, McDevils, Wendy's. And that's like the new Sunday lunch. So when you do that, you take away opportunities for indigenous businesses. It happened in Jamaica in 1972. The Jamaican dollar was 1-to-1 with the US dollar. Now it's 133-to-1 because they're closing down indigenous businesses, homegrown businesses, grassroots economic initiatives, and replacing them with foreign ownership. Think of what Dr. Eric Williams said in 1972. No new 100% foreign-owned companies in Trinidad. But now it's like the foreign-owned companies, because we weren't a republic as yet, are being replaced by some of these companies that are owned by one single family. And all I'm saying simply is that we cannot afford to encourage that. And I close just talking about Petrotrin, because they say they have to close down the refinery because it's running at a loss of $2 billion per year or something like that. But there's a simple solution to that. All you have to do really is, if we have approximately 150,000 motorists, and we get them to pay an extra $1,111 a month, which is $13,333 per year, 150,000 motorists, spending an additional $13,333 per year, that would add up to $2 billion. So all they have to do really is raise the price of gas from $3.97 to $4.97, then they'll earn that. I didn't see the budget this year, so I don't know if they spoke about this. But all they have to do is raise the price of gas by $1 from $3.97 to $4.97, and they would have covered the cost to keep the Petrotrin refinery alive and well. But what did you say? They did raise the price of gas by $1, and they're still closing down the Petrotrin refinery? Hell! Something's wrong with that picture. So until they become in touch with what's happening on the ground, on the grassroots level, then we will just have to keep spending all this money on security and safety. And I will tell you this is personal. I was hurt. I love my Prime Minister, and I'm very proud of him, his image, his intelligence, and his representation. I love him as a brother. But I felt hurt when I heard him say that members of the Syrian community are coming to him saying that they feel unsafe and that they're afraid to send their children out of the home because they don't know what will happen to them. I can't remember when last a Syrian was murdered. I remember 2002. When one was kidnapped. And since then, all hell broke loose. And we turned the kidnapping rate down to 0, from 156 per year to 0. Murder rate is up to over 500 a year now. Almost every day, African people are dying on the street. Why would you come before us and talk about the Syrian parents who are afraid for their children? What about the African parents who are afraid for their children? And he went on to say that this is how it started with the Jewish Holocaust, and that the Jewish Holocaust under Nazi Germany was man's greatest inhumanity to man. Wrong. The African Holocaust, slavery, was man's greatest inhumanity to man. And the children should not have heard that. That should have been retracted. And so I leave you with this. On May the 11th, 2014, all 15 heads of government of CARICOM came together and unanimously agreed to the 10-point plan of action for reparations. The 10-point plan of action for reparations for African slavery were repatriation, a full formal apology, the creation of cultural institutions, an indigenous peoples program, the public health crisis, an African knowledge program, illiteracy eradication, the education from an African syllabus, debt cancellation, and point number 10 in the 10-point plan of action for reparations that all 15 countries in CARICOM agreed to was the transfer of technology. This was drafted by Professor Sir Hilary Beckles. And the reason that the transfer of technology was point number 10 was because it has been synonymous with slavery and colonialism, that in the third world we produce raw materials and mineral resources, but we send them overseas for the refining and the manufacturing and the production of the finished products. That was considered to be slavery. It's like the chocolate in Africa. Most of the chocolate, the cocoa, comes from Ghana. They send it to Europe and America. They package it under wrappers and labels that say Cadbury's and Hershey's. Then they send it back and sell it to Africa. That is considered to be a form of modern-day slavery. So if we close down a refinery which produces the best part, the finished product in energy, it will be like going backwards into modern-day slavery. I pray that something that I said would be beneficial to you in one way or another. I'd like to thank you for being patient with me. Thank you for listening. God bless you.
Next we have Mr. Afra Raymond. Now, Mr. Raymond is a professional fellow of the RICS and the managing director of Raymond and Pierre Limited. He also contributes to the press and broadcast media in Trinidad and Tobago and the Caribbean. His special areas of interest include real estate, property development, land use planning, property taxation, property financing, and the 2009 bailout of the CL Financial Group. He's the past president of the Institute of Surveyors of Trinidad and Tobago over the period 2009 and 2010, and immediate past president of the Joint Consultative Council for the Construction Industry, having served between December 2010 and November 2015. He is a columnist, he is an activist, and he is Mr. Afra Raymond, our next panelist for this afternoon.
Thank you for inviting me to this. I will echo with David, because David started speaking. It's difficult to follow David Mohammed, but I'm going to try. David started speaking, and he started speaking correctly about where we are, because we're at the Cipriani College of Labor and Cooperative Studies, and why we are here. And it's very signal that I'm speaking in the CLR James Auditorium. So it's a big responsibility, and I'm not actually taking a call or anything. I'm actually trying to set up my timer, so I wouldn't go over the 20 minutes and get in trouble. So let me just set my clock working. It's a big responsibility to engage with these questions seriously. And I want us to do that, and you will work with me with this. I consider myself a member of the cooperative and labor movement, having been a shop steward for years, having been on the board of Trinidad Building and Loan for 14 years, which is Trinidad's only building society, having served on Eastern Credit Union's boards for 4 years. So I'm distinctively, in terms of my efforts, a part of this movement. And I consider this institution, which David gave the history of, I wouldn't repeat it, he did it very well, this institution to be an important part as a learning institution of us building a different consciousness from the prevailing consciousness about what needs to happen in the society and what needs to happen in the region. So it's very important for us to have this gathering, all of us, Senator West, myself, the colleagues on the faculty and some of the students and so on. It's very important for us to have this gathering to engage on these points. This is no light-hearted thing. We're here to talk about the budget, and I'm not going to take the conventional approach like my colleague, Senator West spoke earlier on, and Ms. Gregoire spoke with the graphs and the pie charts and all that. I'm not going to be able to do that. I've done that in the past, and frankly, I had lost the taste for it. The whole budget discussion thing and going on TV. And this year, for the last 2 years, I didn't go to any of them. I just gave an excuse to every person who asked me. But because of the Cipriani College of Labor and Cooperative Studies, which I have in high esteem, the first time I've been invited to speak here, because it's Atkins Vidal, who I have a lot of respect for, I accepted the invitation, so I'm here, okay? But I had sort of given up on the whole budget discussion thing, because I think a little bit of it is a little like a mechanical kind of thing. You're not really going deep. The country is at a point where we're trying to turn a corner. We're trying to turn a corner from declining oil and gas revenues. The fortunes of the oil and gas sector are declining. And we're trying to turn a corner when it's to build new projects. We want to build new projects. We don't want to have to continue with the same sorts of projects we had before. We have to have new directions in the economy. And I want to focus on 3 of them, and I want us to go deep and try to get a challenging discourse about what we're really doing. As I say, anybody could describe a thing. So there are 4 speakers tonight, and I'm the 4th speaker. That's the thing. It takes a thinking person and an educated person to be able to describe the meaning of the thing. And I'm going to try to get to the meaning of some of the things in my discourse this evening. Not just the thing, the meaning of the thing. So thank you, David, for giving me that opening and forcing me to come up to the standard. Good. And I want to talk about, so we're trying to change the course of the national economy, and we're trying to change it with some of these mega projects. Because of my professional background, I will be focusing on the mega projects and making some critical remarks as we go into this. The first one I would focus on, which I think Ms. Gregoire, you mentioned, is Tobago Sandals. And Tobago Sandals is something that we need to really engage in as to what it really means. It's a huge project. I think the proposal is for about 750 rooms of an all-inclusive hotel, a high class of hotel, that we don't have anything of that class in Trinidad and Tobago. And to be sure, if Sandals came to Trinidad and Tobago and opened the branch in Tobago at No Man's Land or Golden Grove, whatever you want to call it, there would be a whole influx into Trinidad and Tobago. And let's be crystal clear. The people coming to Trinidad and Tobago to go to Sandals are not the people coming now. Let's be totally clear. It's different people. Apart from the numbers, we're not looking at gross things, we're looking at the quality. Not just the thing, but the meaning of the thing. The successful professional who has a choice to go exactly where they want to go for 6 days or for 8 days or for 11 days, Tahiti or Bora Bora, that is who is coming to Sandals. And those people don't come to Trinidad and Tobago now. Let's be really clear. It's a high-income, qualified person with choices. They're accustomed to a high level of service. Not civility, service. And some of the attitudes we have, let us be frank. Because we're talking to each other, some of the attitudes we have don't fit into that. So when we hear projections, and this is not a political sniping, when we hear projections about 2,000 employed or 3,000 employed or whatever the number is, I don't know how many of them will really be Trinidadians and Tobagonians. I'm being very frank about what it is I'm saying. Because whether you like him or you don't like him, the people who run Sandals have a standard. And they're not going to take the chance in the era of Twitter that somebody goes down to the bar and the barman looking at them funny because they have on a bikini. Or somebody with a big belly come and ask for one more beer. And a Trinidadian want to make a skylark with that. You know it's true. And in fact, in this world, somebody could just whip out their phone. You laughing at your own joke, and they blow you up with Twitter. And Bud Stewart can't take that chance. So we need to be skeptical and to put our attention on the question of how many of us, if the thing came off, In the best possible of worlds, it came off on time, on budget, as proposed. Open on time, yeah? 99% occupancy. How many of us will really, really be working in there? That's my first thing. So this is not, what's that? Outsource, okay. I thought you said peppers. Outsource, yeah. Right. Right, so they'll outsource. That's the first one. But then there's further concerns about sandals. You see, we have two models about how how hotels are built in the Caribbean. Two models. There's a dominant model, which the rest of the Caribbean countries have, because they simply don't have the kind of money we have. So in June of this year, Sandals issued a press release in response to Mia Motley's sharp statement. Mia Motley was elected like 2 weeks before, and she rambled them, discussing the hotel concessions in Barbados. She rambled them in the first 2 weeks. So they issued a 4-page press release to explain everything, setting the record straight. Sandals is on their website. And in that press release, Sandals actually says, we own all of our own resorts, with the exception of one. And it's a resort in Jamaica where they're in a kind of partnership with Guardian Holdings, which is a very good company, and they work well with them and so on and so on, but they own all their properties. Well, in Trinidad and Tobago, because y'all are young students, y'all are academy, y'all are faculty, let us understand what is the structure, have a critical conversation about the structure of the transaction. I am interested not in gross numbers about 2,000 employees and 3,000 jobs and $4 billion. I want to understand the underlying commercial arrangement. If we're not discussing the underlying commercial arrangement, we're not discussing nothing. Let's be absolutely serious. No political sniping here. I didn't have time with the party political thing. When Kamala was here, she used to get it the same way. I didn't have time with that. Now, the Trinidad and Tobago model, which is unique to this island in the Caribbean, is that our state has paid to build all the hotels. The 3 biggest hotels in the country belong to the state of Trinidad and Tobago. That's Trinidad Hilton, built in '62. Hyatt, built in 2008, when Mr. Manning was here. And Tobago Hilton is now called Magdalena, built in '99, going into 2000. Those are the 3 biggest hotels in the country. And the way things are going, again, going along, putting up a straw man, a best possible thing, so on time, on target, everything. The biggest hotel will be Sandals at 750 rooms, and that will be owned by the state too, because that is the model that they're putting forward. So they will continue this model where we spend our taxpayers' dollars to provide the land, design, build, finance, fit and furnish the property, and then do an operation agreement with the hotelier. In this case, it's Sandals or beaches. And the Prime Minister at the moment, which is Dr. Rowley, has actually sought to comfort the public by saying that, in fact, there's nothing unusual or to be perturbed about this arrangement, because it's the same arrangement we have at Hilton, the one by the Savannah, and it's the same arrangement we have at Hyatt. But you know what? Nobody knows what the arrangement is. The arrangement at Hilton is a registered deed in the Registrar General's department. Somebody must have gotten careless and filed that. So I have seen it. I know what it says. It's a public document. But you could never get any disclosure as to what is the performance of the contract. So the contract says that our share is 7.5% of X, Y, and Z. Do we collect 7.5%? Do we collect 6.2%? Do we collect 1.2%? You don't know? I don't know either. You listening to what I'm saying? So we're in a republic with a Freedom of Information Act. I want you to listen to what I'm saying. This is an institution of learning. C.L.R. James, Cipriani, Arthur Andrew Cipriani, listen to what I'm saying. You have a Freedom of Information Act in a republic. And here is not China, right? Here's not Cuba. Here's not North Korea. Here's a free country. The property belongs to us, and we simply do not know what is the performance of that investment. What is the return on investment for those of you who are financial? I see the 2 of you sitting there. What is the return on investment? Can anybody say? What is the return on capital employed? Can anybody say? The answer is nobody can say. So I am being asked to take comfort. You understand me? And there's more. Hyatt Hotel, which from all appearances is a good quality hotel. I've been there, I've stayed there, it's lovely. A lot of local people work there, okay? It's run in accordance with the standards of an international brand. It appears to be well done, okay? All of us have been to functions there and so on and so on. And the agreement for Hyatt Hotel is a secret. I've been trying to get it for 2 years. It's a secret. So you can't find out what is the agreement. You know? It's like school children. Eat your biscuit and stay quiet. All you remember that? Okay? But we have to go deep and understand what the thing is about. And I'll share a story with you. You see, even in our parliamentary tradition of old talk and things that irritate us, stupidness and irritating behavior, and people just making a point to make a point, if you pay attention, you could actually pick up on things. In my opinion, one of the most interesting attorneys general the country ever had is the one we had before this current one, Anand Ramlogan. He was a driven guy, really driven by a whole lot of things, but we don't have time for that. But in fact, he was driven to kind of create an architecture to try and take down some big heads in the PNM. So he brought out lawsuits. It's important to get this, He brought out lawsuits against Professor Ken Julian under 2 headings, where Julian was professor and he was chairman of UTT and he was chairman of ETEC. The UTT lawsuit failed. The ETEC lawsuit went all the way to the Privy Council, and the state was successful, but I don't think they'll pursue it for whatever reason. And there was Malcolm Jones. There was a lawsuit against Mr. Malcolm Jones, the late Mr. Malcolm Jones, in relation to some of the projects at Petrotrin and so on, particularly the gas to liquids. And what was interesting about those lawsuits was that Ramlogan explored the whole question of responsibility for state enterprises. Section 99 of the Companies Act. I asked about 12 top corporate lawyers. And in fact, the first time we had cases that made it to court, that were argued about so for the court to have a view on the proper performance of the duties of a company director, Section 99 cases, with those 3 cases Anand Ramlogan bought. Now, it's clear to me that he bought the cases to bring down the PNM. He wanted to bring down Malcolm Jones and Ken Julian. But out of evil, well, you know the rest of it, you know? So out of wickedness, something good could come. But the point I'm getting to with Ramlogan is that on the 10th of June 2014, I have a thing for dates, he made a remarkable disclosure to Parliament in the Senate. He was a senator. And what Ramlogan disclosed to us was that there had been a defect. I'm going to use some words. I'm not a lawyer, so I may use words that are slightly incorrect, but I don't have any intention to mislead you. There was a defect, a slip-up, something in the paperwork that was wrong with regard to Hyatt, the same Hyatt that's quite successful. If all of us could see successful, it's always full of people. And that defect had been on our side of the agreement, because Hyatt is a public-private partnership, where in fact, the land belonged to Trinidad and Tobago. The building was put up through Udicourt with Patrick Manning, with the whole thing with the waterfront and all of these big buildings. And Hyatt Hotel was operating a hotel there under an operation agreement. There was some slip-up from our side in a piece of paperwork. And as a result of that slip-up, the people at Hyatt Hotel, because they opened in January of 2008, the people at Hyatt Hotel were able, and I want you to listen to me, those of you on your phones, give me attention for 10 seconds. They were able to pay no money to Trinidad and Tobago for 6.5 years. I want you to listen to me. Not a dime. Ramlogan went in there with his people. He had his firms, he prefers to use certain firms and so on. All that is part of the narrative. And they dismantled that situation, the apparent defect that Trinidad and Tobago had. And they were able to recover. It's in the Parliament Hansard, 10th of June 2014. They were able to recover. Here the amount of money that these people had back squeezed on us. So you're telling yourself you have a profitable hotel. You're telling yourself your cousin got married down there and your niece graduation was down there. And you want to tell yourself that. But in fact, 334 million Trinidad and Tobago dollars was back squeezed. I'm using our colloquial language. It's not loyally, but you know what I mean. It was back squeezed because they had a way they could have found a technicality not to pay the money they were supposed to pay. Now, the only reason we know that, again, because of the ego and the way the ego operates in a man's mind, Ramlogan was trying to make a point about Kola Hart and Patrick Manning. So he came into the Parliament and he broke what I call the code of silence, because they never talk about the amount of money from the hotels. They talk about everything else. They never do. They never discuss the performance. They never discuss the underlying commercial arrangements. And Ram Logan came into the parliament in a fit of vexation or something that day. And he gave out all the details about that situation with the $334 million. And what's interesting is that we have a situation here. I want to make 2 more points about Tobago Sandals if I wrap. So we have a situation about how the commercial arrangement does not work. And then we also have a situation with how state enterprises and the state investments do not work. So let me break it out for you all. I already said that the 3 largest hotels in the country are owned by the state. And there's a 4th one in contemplation. And it, from all appearances, all the political weight is behind it. It appears it's going to come off sometime in the next year or 2. It's going to start construction and so on. Fine. One of the problems we have is that the agreements surrounding hotels are confidential. They're so confidential, it's frightening to understand how confidential they are. The question has to be, how do we as a country gather the institutional knowledge to have a proper negotiation? In the case of Tobago Hilton, now called Magdalena Grand, and Trinidad Hilton, those 2 investments are held by E-Tech. In the case of Hyatt Hotel, that investment is held by UDCOT, which is who did the waterfront with Mr. Manning and Mr. Colahart and so on and so on. Now let's pause. What should we do now that a 4th hotel is in contemplation? To my mind, if that is what we're doing, and I'm offering a critical perspective, if we decided we're going to go into hotels as an alternative to the oil and gas thing, the least we should do is to put them into one structure with one chairman so we could have a development, a growth of institutional knowledge. And we could understand what works and what doesn't work. But no, they formed a new state enterprise. There's a fetish about state enterprises. So you close down to TDC, and you have one for Trinidad, you have one for Tobago, and you have one for strategy. You bring 3. And they formed a new state enterprise. Very quietly, it was not secret, but it was done fairly discreetly, to hold the Sandals Resort. So the potential for institutional knowledge and institutional learning is reduced. And we have to start to behave like a learning society. I would say that, in fact, I've been trying to get hold of a document that was signed. Today's a lovely anniversary. It was signed a year ago. 10th of October 2017, Dr. Rowley signed the MOU with Sandals. Dr. Rowley went to the Parliament on the 12th of October and was emphatic. He's quite an emphatic speaker. But there's no secret. This is not like the government before, where they had things underhand and so on. There's no secret. Mr. Adam Stewart, that's Butch Stewart's son, he was the CEO at the time. 27th of February this year, he was on the media, very emphatic. There's no secret. There are no secret terms and agreements. This MOU is just something where we have an arrangement to build a hotel, and we're working with the support of the Trinidad and Tobago government and so on and so on. And I want to know what are the terms and conditions of that MOU. I've applied to get it under the Freedom of Information Act, and I've been blocked and blocked and blocked. The fight is not over. I don't want to say more now, but the fight is not over. I've been blocked and blocked and blocked. They don't want to tell you what they're really, really doing. So here we are at the Cipriani College of Labor and Cooperative Studies in the last 35 seconds. And what I could tell you is that what we're contemplating in this country, whether we're looking at the Labre dry dock, where the Chinese are probably going to get all the employment to build it. If you think I lie, well, tell me why, okay? Or you're looking at Sandals with the MOU, or you're looking at Petrotrin with its own issues. You have a situation where we are looking at a problem in our country where we have public land. It's public land being developed. I want it as a phone call. It's alarm. It's public land being developed with public money, supposedly for the public benefit. And when you ask for the details, they can't tell you that. You know why? It's a private deal. Think about it. This is the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. This is 2018. Okay? The final point I want to make, Chair, before I leave the stage and it would be remiss of me to stand here and not make the point, is that one aspect of the Petrotrin closure that's impending, that horrified me, and I think it's completely unacceptable, and I would say it here, it would be morally cowardly of me not to say it here, is that I was horrified to read a report in last Wednesday's Express at page 3, where Minister Imbert was explaining that they were going to be paying the retrenched Petrotrin workers 2 times the industry rate. Twice the industry rate. Minister Imbert went on to say that that had been negotiated with the OWTU. And as far as I'm concerned, that's open bribery. The Minister of Finance cannot tell me that land here is $100 a square foot. Everybody knows the land there is $100 a square foot. You want to build a school there, and you're so anxious to build a school, you're going to pay everybody there $200 a square foot? Completely unacceptable. It's wrong when landowners claim too much money. It's wrong when contractors overcharge. I know, I was president of JCC, I could tell you. It's wrong when they do it. It's wrong when the financial system makes excessive profits. It can't be right when labor is getting 2 times the industry rate. And Minister Imbert said that it was published in the Wednesday's Express of the 3rd of October. The OWTU is an organization that's not known for being shy. I've heard no refutal from OWTU. It's very disappointing. If that is true, we're in a very slippery place. Be warned, because they're trying to recruit labor next. Thank you.
I also think I have to thank the persons at the college who work behind the scenes, Carrie Ann, Miss Pilgrim, Miss Sutherland, and others on staff who've done a lot of work over the last few days, members of our marketing and stakeholder relations who've put a lot of this together for us. So I want to say thanks. Thank you to Selwyn, who's taping all of this for us. I just want to make 2 quick points, not to do another presentation, but just to say to students, thank you for coming out. Our college, and one of the challenges with tertiary education is that we have conveyor belts in this country. So you move along and somebody gives you something, and then you move along and you don't actually grow as an individual. And this is how you grow. This is what education is. We cannot continue the certification. When you look around and you're upset about who's in the parliament and the deficiencies in the parliament, guess what? When you have all of these students sitting in colleges doing nothing more than being excited about certification and what is coming in an exam, you're going to get the kind of parliament that we have. That's a fact. Yeah? And I know some of you have sat in my classes and lots of things don't come on the exam. Because that is not the most important thing for me. It is when you come into the college, you have to leave a better person. Yes? And we have to think about individual growth and holistic growth as students. So this is ongoing. Colin, the 25th, 24th? Right. Credit Union Week. Credit Union Week, so we'll be back here again on the 25th talking about credit unions. The 26th, we talk about productivity. Yeah? We're going to take a Cipriani slant on that, right? Because we have to talk about the obstacles placed in front of cooperatives and entrepreneurship and so on. So you're only productive when you work on the plantation, not when you work